Good evening, everybody. I'm Steve Dockman, the 2020 president for the Atlanta Innovation Forum. We're extremely excited to have you all here. We have a fabulous evening for you. We hope to make the next hour very thoughtful, provocative, and have you walk away with some insights that you can ponder on over the holidays, and you'll come back and join us in 2021. Before we start and bring our panel up, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for the year. Right Point, Carabiner, Stone Resource Group, and Stable Kernel have been big supporters of the forum throughout the year and years past. And also want to reach out to Cox for their support of our Women's Special Interest Group, Women Driving Innovation. Thank you all. Without you all being here, we wouldn't be here. We have a little housekeeping to do tonight, focused and targeted for our membership as we're ending our year and our last meeting of the year, and it's time to bring up our nominees for our 2021 board. Before I do that, I want to thank some folks for a phenomenal job. To Chip Standifer and Abby Murdy for your longtime leadership. Both of them are stepping off the board this year. We appreciate your support, your kindness, your effort, and the many, many hours. We also want to thank our leaders of our special interest groups, Addie and Liz, for working and putting on some great sessions with Women Driving Innovation, and Tunde, Zach, and Caroline Dunn, who've done a phenomenal job of nurturing Atlanta Marketing Innovation SIG, and we're excited about some great things from both those groups in 2021. What I'm going to do is give you a chance and present our board for 2021. These are the candidates our nominating committee has put together. For our membership, we'll be getting out a voting link for you on Monday. Remind everybody, according to our bylaws, you have 30 days to vote, and we'll be announcing it before the end of the year, and this will be the leadership we propose for next year. Liz Simpson is going to be our proposed president, and I'm excited, and you'll get a chance to meet her at the end of our session. We have a tremendous group of panelists tonight, and what we really want to do is we want to get you all thinking about 2021, not in 2021, not tomorrow, but tonight. So without further ado, let me bring our panelists on. I want to welcome Benn Konsynski of Emory, KP Reddy, Jane McCracken, Ricky Hunter, and Nelson Chu. Let me turn it over to Ben, who's going to drive you for the rest of the hour until we bring on Liz at the end, and I'm going to sign off until then. Ben, take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. Good evening, everyone. We're going to have our folks introduce themselves just for a moment, then we'll come back to some general preparation just so that we'll get just the panelists onto the screen. So can we have our panelists introduce themselves? KP.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Ben. Thanks, everybody, for having me. KP Reddy, I'm the general partner of Shadow Ventures. We're a seed stage and now currently pre-seed stage venture firm. We invest all over the country and now all over the world. Focused on any innovation improving the built environment. So that can be environmental, construction, real estate tech. So we're pure play tech. Happen to be based here in Atlanta with offices in New York, Chicago, Boulder.
Jane?
Great, thanks, Ben. Hi, everybody. I'm Jane McCracken. I'm the Assistant Director at the Advanced Technology Development Center. Thank you to everyone in the audience because your tax dollars help support us. We are the state of Georgia's technology incubator. And believe it or not, we're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. So we're having a lot of fun helping entrepreneurs based in Georgia start and scale successful tech companies.
And joining us via voice because he's too good looking, Ricky.
I think that says it all, doesn't it, Ben? No, I'm Ricky Hunter. I'm the education director for Comcast, NBC, Universal's The Farm, and now Sports Tech. So we've been around for about 3 years as The Farm, and we're now taking on a new program with a lot of large sports partners, and we're launching in February 2021 our new Sports Tech Accelerator out of Comcast headquarters near the Battery. Thanks for having me.
And Nelson?
Hi, I'm Nelson Chu with Kinetic Ventures. We are investors in early stage technology companies. For us these days, early stage is really post revenues, might be as little as 20, 30, 50,000 per month recurring revenues and up. And technology for us these days is almost all software. We're fortunate to invest in the early days in optical networking hardware companies, but these days it's pretty much all software and software enabled services. There are 2 of us here in the greater Atlanta region, myself and Cam Lanier, and I have 2 partners up in our DC office, Jake Tarr and Willie Heflin. So that's who we are.
Well, welcome. We have an awesome panel, fascinating portfolio of experience to deal with tonight, and looking forward on some predictions. It's great to be back with one of my favorite groups, the Wireless Technology Forum. That was the root basis for this activity that I've always been a fan of for quite some time. And I want to shout out to all the SOBs that are online. I know a few of you are. SOBs are students of Benn, and I want to thank them for joining us as well, joining us for this 4 seasons total predicting activity. I'd like you to raise any questions in the chat during our session, and forgive the fact that I have a green screen background. I'm virtual backgroundless, so I am literally green screen, which might be an interesting novelty for itself right now. So please, questions into the chat, and we'll get to those as we proceed down the line. The future is a hard place to know, but if you're going to predict, you should predict often. And also, we find that those that have been my students know that the future is best seen with a running start. That standing starts are very poor predictions of the future, but running starts are a better experience for more secure and certain predictions. And we're fortunate in this awesome panel that we have tonight to have a good portfolio of real experience that gives us and them a running start on their predictions for the future. They're not just standing start speculators. They've all been involved in these spaces, technology evolutions for some time. And so we're very fortunate to have this portfolio of folks to work with. I want to set some ground rules. Our objective is to look at predictions for 2021 and beyond. So we're not here to look strictly at the near term. COVID obviously is a major disruption to our traditional evolutionary patterns, and we would certainly need to look at that exogenous front onto our might have been ordinary or controlled evolutionary patterns. Many are seeing it as an extraordinary benefit for us in many ways, at least from the standpoint of allowing us to divest ourselves of some of the baggage that we've had. For example, I wanted to make sure that we're targeting the 21st century. Too much of our discussions is about getting back. And for many things, there is no back anymore. And we need to be looking forward. And we've got to stop trying to fix the 20th century and start targeting and making sure that we're addressing advancement into that 21st century mode. My operating principles in moderating these things, as many people know, is by your ideas you are known. And therefore, we want to hear from each of you about the things you are interested in, the beliefs you have, and the expectations of adoption or impact of technologies or new processes and practices. And so we'll, by your ideas, you are known. One word I don't want to hear much of, we slip into it, is the word trending. It's an often meaningless word, and we use it to take comfort in some things in motion. We're looking for hard predictions about what you believe are manifest opportunities and things going forward. And our target is commerce and society. So all aspects of commerce and society. We're not here about the intrinsic advancement of technology per se, and there's no intrinsic value in the technology unless it manifests itself in somehow transforming commerce and society. So we will be, as a moderator, I'll be entirely abusive of anybody who comes out and says things like 5G is big, or AI, ML, DL, EIEIO, without getting into some depth of what aspects you're talking about, because we see so many smoke sculptures out on technology activities. We want to know what the impact areas are. We're after the now, the easing out of the COVID period, and what we're curious about what will sustain and maintain, and what will be a near-term reality. And then we want to look at the next. So the now, the near, and the next. What we're experiencing and lessons we're learning now in the COVID period that will manifest themselves in the near term, and our next period. What might we expect in the 2 to 3 year type horizon? So what I'd first like to do is to start by asking each of our panelists to offer 2 or 3 predictions of things they're most excited about in the next 2 or 3 years, and not go through a long list, just a short list of top priorities, things that you're most excited about, that you see becoming the reality, becoming norms in and over the next 2 to 3 years. And I'm going to start with our master baker, KP, who is actually a professional croissant maker, but he spoke about his side hustle that he's working on as well earlier. So KP?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I think so. In a current COVID world, what we're seeing that I think won't go away is the lack of geography in terms of how we think about anything. On the investment side, we continue to invest in like a deal a month anywhere in the country. CEOs that we haven't met, we don't need to meet them. It's not that important. It's just how we've always operated. We've seen more investor activity on the LP side in the last 90 days than we've seen in the last 2 years. And that money's coming from all over the world. And I think everybody has, if you can interact with your grandkids via Zoom, why can't you invest in a startup? Why can't an LP deploy allocation? We don't think that's going away, because I think we've all kidded ourselves that like jumping on planes was a good thing. And so we're just seeing a surge of capital inflow. We see on the corporate side, we have a lot of corporate investors. They're pulling back on R&D. And so they're going to kind of slow play feature sets to the consumer. They don't have to, really do that much in terms of product innovation. So they're slow playing their balance sheet. So if you take those 2 things, we think it's the best time to be an entrepreneur. We think this is the time. If you can go get there's a ton of capital out there, like a lot. If you can get the capital, build something, by the time you come out of this cycle, which is basically a depression for the next 1.5 years, you get out of the cycle, you build, All the big tech folks are going to still have a lot of cash on their balance sheet, and they're going to be looking for acquiring all the technology and innovation that they were unwilling to build. So beyond that, the tech that we're seeing, that I see a lot, I think customers are now holding people accountable to AI bullshit. So, we talk about AI, like, no, you actually have to deliver on it. And that delivery is, tell me how many jobs I can get rid of. Tell me how many people I can fire. Don't tell me about how AI is going to improve my workflow and all that. Here's my org chart. I will buy your AI if you can cross heads off the list. And that we're seeing hardcore right now.
Do you see, KP, do you see resistance to this new pattern of remote decision processes and exchange on investment decisions?
The only people that aren't getting it are the people that are just not moving ahead, right? I will tell you, like, our European and Asian and a lot of our New York investors, it took them about 2 to 3 months to adapt. But literally, we're having 3 Zoom calls and closing an LP. And they're getting very, very comfortable with it. They're learning how to make decisions. They're also learning that all the support staff that they needed to run Gatekeeper, they don't need them anymore. Having a one-on-one conversation versus running through the gauntlet, they're feeling very comfortable about getting more, like, you can get more of their time than, oh, let me go talk to the portfolio manager, let me go talk to that person. We're having more calls straight at the top, and then they're descending the work that needs to be done versus, we kind of say what's shifted is the best doc in a hospital is running triage in the ER. That's what these allocators, the high net worth, and they're doing the first meetings now versus making you go through 100 people to get to them. And then they're handing it off to their staff to go do the rest of the story.
That's interesting concept of a realignment of the leverage of the skill sets, probably to better effect than we've had in the past as well. Yep. Thank you. Jane.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, it's been obviously an interesting year for everyone. The ATDC has about 130 companies in our portfolio. Those are companies that we are physically and virtually incubating. And yes, some of the companies are still physically going into the office. It may not be every single one of the employees, but we are seeing quite a few still down in Midtown coming into the office. I think some of the trends I'm seeing as a result of looking at our companies, I agree with KP, the money's there. For the 4th year in a row, the companies in our portfolio have raised in excess of $100 million. And you're seeing those companies raise money all via Zoom without necessarily having face-to-face meetings. I think some of the trends that we're seeing happening with a lot of the companies are those companies that are helping whatever industry they're in make their digital transformations. That's happening. And that doesn't matter whether it's retail, whether it's medicine, whether it's the supply chain, that digital transformation seems to have moved up the agenda for a lot of the customers. Another thing we're seeing, it's a lot about the customer experience and how you can create a positive customer experience regardless of the medium that you're using, whether it's in person or whether it's these virtual situations. It's a real focus on the customers, and some of the companies who seem to have embraced that are really making great strides forward. And finally, I think just from watching our companies, I think there will be continued gig working, freelance working, contract working, all kinds of flexible working going forward. So those are just some of the trends. Hey, I use that word, sorry about that. That's some of the observations I'm making based on what's happening at the ATDC.
Well, Jane, do you think that the smaller upstarts are feeling advantage in ways that they weren't in the past, that they had to deal with gauntlet of face-to-face meetings, and this way they could get this triage that KP was talking about in an earlier fashion. And so are they more energized by this ability to find easier access and quicker rejection, if you will, even in many ways?
Well, they definitely are seeing faster meetings, easier access, because I think all of us are cramming more meetings into our day than we used to because there's no travel. I will say, yes, they're going up the food chain in terms of, or up the command chain in terms of some of the investors they're meeting with. We are seeing deals, substantial size deals, 3, 5, 6 millions, which is a substantial round for our companies, closing within 3 months. So you're seeing those investment groups figure out how to get the due diligence done efficiently, put terms out there that are acceptable in today's market, very reasonable valuations that the companies are comfortable with. And so it's exciting for me to see the capital still going in, still seeing opportunities for entrepreneurs to grow a company.
You referenced the customer journey and customer experience transformation, and you also mentioned the digital transformation that people were on a slow path on. Mm-hmm. The exogenous force here has transformed everything, both inside the enterprise and outside, in the relationship of the nature of that customer journey is in radical transformation right now. And sometimes they're going to need your folks to be the innovator for their evolution of the corporate view of customer journey as well. There should be actually, in some sense, more excitement to some of the innovations that your portfolio is offering.
Well, I think there is a lot of excitement. Let me give you a couple of examples. We're seeing text messaging emerge in a big way as a communication form, and customers never before using text messaging, it's become the preferred media. Whether it's retail, you're seeing it in staffing, warehousing, facility management. And it's interesting because I think if we all think about it, we're inundated with a lot of email. We're inundated with a lot of other things, but what's the first form of communication that we seem to be responding to today? And that's SMS messaging. And so we're seeing several of our companies doing quite well in that space. You're also seeing voice and the way that voice is being adapted in lots of different ways. So again, this is kind of some of that customer experience. What are the preferences that make customers more comfortable in transacting, more comfortable in learning about things? So it's kind of fun to sit back and watch.
Our experience certainly dealing with the progression from Gen X through the early millennials, through the late millennials, through the Gen Z structure is late millennials and Gen Z are coming to the table by saying they don't want to go to your website, go through your navigation your way. You come to me in the ways that come to me where I am in chat and interface with me in context, meaning you know me, my context, instead of me having to navigate through your space. That's for boomers and Gen X folk, and we won't tolerate that. So some of these are inexorable trends that have come on that we saw in general anyway, but they're clearly being accelerated in this period of remote interaction.
That's right.
As well. Thank you, Nelson.
Well, Ben, I'm so glad that you started the preface with regards to what are some big problems out there, right, versus the technologies. I think those that tend to want to promote technologies first are, pushing their research papers or their agendas or whatever. And so we, like the others, are definitely much more focused on what problems out there that need to be solved. And so certainly a couple that have emerged that have accelerated things in which we've been investing include the, blank from anywhere, right? Work from anywhere, educate from anywhere, shop from anywhere, medicine from anywhere. I think those trends, the cat's out of the bag, right? And there's one McKinsey study that talked about how, e-commerce have been growing pretty gradually. We were at 17% of the US purchases were conducted via e-commerce last year. In a period of 4 months, we went to 34%. That was their projection for 2030. We did that. We did 10 years in 4 months. So that's not going backwards, right? The level of work from home and educate from anywhere, that's not going backwards either. And the notion of telemedicine, apparently though, I found out the issue with telemedicine is not so much the tools and the physicians, it's actually the payors, it's the insurance companies that will reimburse it. But assuming we get through some of those bottlenecks, then it's all of the tools and infrastructure that needs to be put in place to conduct all of that securely, right? So obviously cybersecurity, the notion of identifying who you are and making sure that you're accessing records that are really yours, broadband anywhere, right? We started a company literally from scratch about 4 or 5 years ago that was bringing broadband to rural markets, right? Who would have known that it's one of the hottest sectors right now? More interactive platforms to make the notion of interactivity much more commonplace, right? And so it's not going to be unusual if you're back in the office and 2 of the 5 participants are remote, but it won't be so clunky as to maybe have to have some goofy laptop or something. It'll be much more seamless, I think, from that perspective. So all those kinds of tools are things that we're looking at. Something that's related to that, and we're not device investors, but we're seeing it in our daily lives, where just this notion of continuous self-monitoring, right, is pretty remarkable. And I think we've broken through the stigma of notion of, do I really want to put a wearable on and monitor my breathing, eating, and sleeping habits? I think people have now come to expect that, right? In fact, my partner, who had been worried about being exposed to COVID through his family, mentioned to his doctor, say, can I just go ahead and load up on all the meds right now? I mean, it clearly works. And they said, no, we can't do that. And the doctor looked at him, his wrist, and said, is that the Apple Watch 6? He said, yeah. I said, okay, well, all you gotta do is just keep monitoring your oxygenation. I was like, does Watch 6 does oxygenation? He said, yep. I said, oh my God, that's amazing. So I think we've come to expect this notion of data everywhere, including on ourselves, but it also ties back to the notion of medicine from anywhere, right? Our doctors will be able to monitor us from wherever we are and provide us much better and probably more granular feedback on, hey, Nels, you've been wanting to do X, Y, and Z or train for a particular race, maybe you should be changing your eating habits or changing your sleeping habits or changing your training habits. And a lot of it will be through the machine, right? It'll be machine learning. It won't be actually a physician sitting there. And then finally, I think, cat's out of the bag with regards to the gig economy, right? Assuming that we can get through some of the legislative issues and all the tools and services to make that happen, right? So we've been investors in a company that allows basically traditional enterprises to pay their employees like they're gig economy workers. Now they're full-time employees, but it gives them access to their pay whenever they work. I think that cat's way out of the bag, right? If you're a millennial, do you want to sling packages and drive a big old truck for 2 weeks before you get paid? Or do you want to sit in the comfort of your own Honda Civic, jamming out to your own tunes and dropping off dinner and get paid that day? I think that choice is pretty easy for most millennials, right? Why the hell would they sling packages for 2 weeks before they get paid? So anyway, just the notion of helping these traditional enterprises look and feel more like a gig economy company, I think is going to be really, really important. So those are some of the trends that we've been investing in for a while, but have been clearly accelerated in the past 8 months.
A couple things, sort of macro trends come to mind from your comments. One is a macro trend towards the continuous, the things that have been historically episodic, annual visits for your health, or annual audits in the firm. We're moving into continuous audits. We're moving into continuous health monitoring and maintenance. The IoT wearables, structures, and other forms allow us to, Apple Watches. By the way, I ran a forum on telehealth on Monday evening, and we gave away an Apple Watch as a part of that forum. And I think you're going to get access to a video of that discussion as well, if not to an Apple Watch. But the notion of these things that we've looked at because of physical inefficiency, we've looked at episodic, monthly, annual, and all that. Now it's all the time. And it's all the time on auditing. Every transaction is audited. Every transaction is compliance and other things like that. So anybody that innovates in the domain of moving from the episodic to the continuous has an opportunity here.
Absolutely.
You all, please go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that's absolutely true, right? And the physical exam one's a good example. You know, again, how often you pay your employees is another example, right? Why are we waiting 2 weeks?
Right.
Well, it's just because the old HR system set up that way. You should pay them every day they work, right? So anyhow, yeah, those are. I think you hit on a real theme.
That's divesting this baggage from the 20th century practices. And the issue on the gig is interesting too. We look on it as a new form of work patterns, but in some ways it's a new career pathing opportunity. We live in a remix era. I tell my students who are our parents that their children are better served by building a portfolio of skills than pursuing a particular historic career path. I am a product manager and so forth. In the remix era, you elementalize, you break things apart, you build macro credentials and micro credentials, and you craft your own job. You're going to craft your own job, and it's going to be for a gig. It's going to be for that pay on short cycle, and it's going to be for your investments in personal development to build your portfolio of skills. And we see that growing, and it manifests itself in this gig domain. And that talks to holding things back, because you also mentioned the holding back on the gigs is regulation. The same thing on telehealth has been on regulation and the payor community holding back. And guess what broke that? COVID. COVID broke the old rules of regulation and the old rules of payer constraint. And so in some sense, it's created a remix opportunity in health provisioning, a new relationship between the payor providers and the patient themselves and caregivers. So I think all those things are mentioned in your commentaries. Very good. One last thing is that these networks grow. We tend in the 20th century model to look at things growing from centralized and decentralized structure. That's not true in the 21st century. 21st century is about things growing distributed forms. And your gig economy structure is so very different as well. I tell my students that 15 years ago, you would never tell a child to get in a car with a stranger. Now you might say, take Uber. You take Uber because the nexus of controls and complexity are no longer constrained, and that you're able to do things that you were not willing to do or able to do or did not have the complexity tolerance to do in the past. So it opens new innovation paths as well. Thank you, Ricky. Our audio
Ben,
contribution.
how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We
Excellent.
can hear you.
Hey, Ben. So I have a prediction that actually kind of builds on Jane's prediction. I too believe that customer experience is more important than ever. As technology starts to kind of democratize everything, as we've kind of been talking about, we start to level the playing field for what we're offering as businesses and startups. And so what a lot of times becomes our customers' differentiator, and the thing they care about most is the customer experience and how they can deliver a better customer experience to their customers. So with the technology, you know, everyone can build a technology. It's becoming easier and easier to build technology. The one thing I've seen, at least that differentiates a lot of our founders to start taking market share away from these, you know, larger competitors, is that thorough understanding of the customer experience and delivering on that customer experience. So I wanted to speak to that. I also wanted to share, I think teams are going to become, and we're already seeing it, more diverse. And this diversity leads to more creativity. We're seeing that, you know, all female founder teams have better ROIs for their investors. And so as we start to see kind of these more diverse and inclusive teams, I think we're going to start to see hopefully more creative ideas, maybe different organizational structure, maybe different cultures within organizations. And so I'm hoping this more inclusive kind of, I'm going to use trend, inclusive trend. Hopefully it continues to kind of get that, you know, ultimately ROI, but that inclusivity and that culture that kind of, I think, is going to elevate, hopefully, output.
Well, and certainly the experience has also been, in the past, you always had 3 active generations. And now we're dealing with 4, almost 5 active generations at mixing. So part of that mix is not only the gender mixes and other mixed structures in there, but your the boomer generation still there, damn them, and the Gen Z are growing quite rapidly into those structures. So part of it are mixed generations with different patterns of experience that are in there too. To those of you that are late millennials and Gen Z, YOLO means what? Somebody?
I guess you only live once.
You only live once. Well,
Yeah.
that's for you guys. For boomers, for my generation, it means your life is over. And we have a whole different tude, man, for that aspect of it
And
as well.
taking this into a darker angle here, we need to head towards more light.
Was that an instruction for me for boomers? Head to the light? Is that? Oh God.
Oh man.
And Ricky, you have some interest too in something we haven't talked about much to this point, and that is the sensory experience of that customer experience. We talked about voice and we talked about SMS, but we are living the Zoom life right now, and we're living a 2-dimensional interface, and it's getting exhausting to people. Any comments?
It is, but I think the alternative, which, you know, if we just said, let's go full VR, right? 3D is much more challenging, I think much more demanding on us than it would be to do these 2D videos. You know, it's hard to just be on video. Well, obviously for me, it's very difficult, but to get someone to actually, you know, first have a VR headset, just have all the equipment, and then actually from a professional environment, you know, making sure that everyone has the right things to have an effective VR meeting. I just think it's not there, and I don't know if there's a demand for it. You know, we've done Zoom. Everyone pivoted to Zoom. Did anybody pivot to, you know, 3D chats or VR chats? From a gaming perspective, yes, but from a professional perspective, I think we're more than 2 or 3 years away from kind of widespread adoption for VR, at least from a socialization or interactivity standpoint.
Well, I can speak from the educational side. and also from a person who's done a lot of research on AR, VR, and especially in virtual world environments, that the educational community is becoming very intolerant of the 2D interface, and also the inattention that opportunity that it presents. Like right now, I cannot see an audience, and in that kind of way that our educational community is intolerant of it, and we're seeking more immersive. It's not a question of AR, VR goggles, Quest headsets, and so forth, but it is a matter of getting into immersive experience and more continuous engagement and more sense of attention. And I think that's where innovation opportunity. Go ahead, somebody.
But I think I have a different point of view. I think it's more exhausting to jump on planes.
You can have it. You can be wrong if you want.
Right. I think jumping on planes, chit-chatting with people over coffee, like it's just a waste of time. I do 30-minute Zoom calls from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and I'm about as productive as it is, and that's called work. And then at 7:01, I stop working, and it's super efficient for work, right? Because that's what we get paid to do, is show up and work, not have coffee and hang out with each other. And I think I'd rather like knock out my work day highly efficiently and not be on planes and not be sitting through PowerPoint presentations for an hour. Because, walking out of a presentation 30 minutes in saying, hey, that's good enough, I don't need to hear the next 30 minutes, is rude. But on a Zoom call, you say, hey, I think we have enough. I think this is great. And you can end early. And I'm kind of happy.
That's maybe fine for you. For educational environments, we're less tolerant of that caprice. And yeah, I think you're going to see it. I predict it. I stake KP's life on that will happen. Go ahead.
I'm curious though, if we go back to the experience, right, understanding our customers, do the students want more immersive? Do they want to be seen? Like from their perspective, how do they want to engage with the instructors?
Well, students, when you get into exams and things like that, they accommodate the experience on it. We have, for example, I can speak to Emory's doing a lot of hybrid structures of teaching, and the problem is the mixture of the hybrid structure degrades both the online and the in-person side of it, and so in many ways you need to create a whole new pattern of experience. What the students want now is, and many of them do not like either side of that, and want to either go back to the old way or find new ways of learning. And what I'm expressing to you is that you've got to challenge the assumptions associated with the perception of going back to old ways and what's going forward. And besides that, there's no going back to old tuition patterns, for example, from an educational standpoint. Matriculation learning in a 4-year window, it's lifelong learning, it's personal development. All the things we were talking about for the gig economy are going to be driving people into new innovative fashion. That's why we call it innovation, guys. We're not innovating by retreating to old comfortable ways. We're looking at new ways that are episodically engaging.
Ben, I do think we have to keep in mind that one of the hindrances to innovation is the human that's involved, unfortunately, right? So it's not just the technology, right? Sometimes it's the technology, sometimes the human, right? So with all due respect to all the faculty members on the call here, it just takes a different skill set, right? So the two experiences I recall would be my high schooler, where, first couple of weeks of school, they split the alphabet in half, and the first half would be in the classroom and the second half would be remote. And, the teachers naturally tended to gravitate towards who was in the classroom, right? Even though someone was remote, raising their hand or looked looked like they were lost. It's hard to get their attention. And then I saw a little video of how they're handling the mixed classroom up at the business school. And, they had, out of 90 students, perhaps 20 were in the classroom and 60 plus were remote. But each of those people were displayed on a 36-inch screen. They had 60 30-inch screens scattered around the room. There was no way that someone's going to fall asleep in that situation, right? When you have 60 30-inch screens. So some of it is technology, and some of it is really the faculty members have to figure it out too, though.
Well, but nobody said it's all sides have to re-rationalize. You don't evaluate things based on your first operating experience, and you don't evaluate it on the initial capital investment on it. The winners down the road are not going to be based on speeding up the mess or trying to recapture old patterns. It's going to be the new ways of learning. It's about learning, not teaching. And it's about the students engaged and the faculty engaged in new ways, not trying to capture or replicate old ways. Same thing with customer experience. That we talk about retail. How long have you heard on retailing that, well, it's all about the shopping experience, is a social experience. You need to go in the store to browse around. That's what makes the store a valuable asset. And see what people are doing now.
So again, Ben, one of the things that we in the software world, right, with some of our portfolio companies, the customers, the decision makers want to talk to people that actually know what they're talking about. Not the BDR, not the SDR, not all these people in between. And now that the content holders have more time because they're not jumping on planes, they're not in as many meetings, there's this this idea that, like, why do we need that SDR? Those are all just obstacles, like fake friction to making a purchase, right? We don't go into a car dealership, oh, let me see what I want. We pretty much know what we want. And I think in this environment, as important people have more time and have more availability, I started doing all our inbound, for the last 3 months, I've done all our inbound startup inquiries myself. I did the first call just to run an experiment to see, do I need all these other people handling the first call? Because I can figure it out pretty quick. And guess what? The startup wants to talk to the GP. I mean, that's their ultimate, they get excited about talking to a partner versus the analyst. And we're seeing it with some of our tech companies, this idea of like all these people in between and the customer wanting to talk to the person with the content, with the knowledge, seems to be breaking down all these weird and strange sales processes, pre-sales and sales engineer and SDR and BDR. I have to talk to 5 people before I can give you my money, which I think in the B2B world, that's really shifting. The new experience is I want to talk to the guy that knows what he's doing or the gal that knows what they're doing. I don't want to talk to all these other people.
Absolutely. And I think that's a key part of the dynamics, is that we're reshuffling roles and responsibilities. One of the consequences is the burnout. I know some of those experts and our central folks get burnt out and are really exhausted. We certainly see that as well. I think let's any other comments before we turn it over to other questions? Jane, do you have?
No, I just like that we are talking about a customer experience. And I like that people are running experiments and seeing that the traditional ways of approaching something, whether it's a B2B software sale, whether it's education, whether it's a retail experience, the rules have been tossed out the window, and it's all up to figure out what's going to new and what's going to be new and what's going to stick.
And we're certainly, I hope that some of your portfolio companies are certainly taking lead as being the experimental basis that others will adopt, because some of them are not willing to, some of the large organizations are not willing to run those experiments. So I think they're going to rely on you guys to do so. Okay, one last thing I want to ask everybody. a very simple question, and we're going to turn it over a quick round. Simple question for everyone. This is, what is not that should be?
It's
Who
not.
wants to be? What is not that should be?
You're like Yoda. This is Yoda speak. What is not that should be?
This is a fucking riddle.
Like a Yoda question.
Well,
What is not?
what is not? You guys are here to talk about innovation.
Basically,
What is not that should be?
What should be happening that's not happening.
No,
Yeah.
I want it more poetic than that. Good God.
I'll
No.
jump in. I am
Okay.
fascinated by the whole sustainability circularity thing, and I'd like to see that discussed a bit more. So from the very beginning, we're kind of thinking about that circularity in everything we do. What goes around comes around. So I'll go with that.
Anyone else?
I'm trying to avoid a political quagmire, so I'm going to think about this for a little bit. I don't want to step in it again.
What is not?
I will make a comment. Look, at the end of the day, everybody on this call completely believes in this notion of personal accountability, right? And if you don't like something, change it rather than complain about it. I mean, that's the definition of entrepreneurship, right? And going back to the beginning of the conversation, I think ultimately, and some of the comments you made, Ben, about the gig economy and education, ultimately what we need to train everybody from, 2 months old to 100 years old is, if you don't like something, fix it, right? Go out there and fix it. Stop complaining about it and be an entrepreneur and be entrepreneurial and view that as a problem that needs to be addressed, right? And so I just wish that more people had the entrepreneurial mindset that we in our community live and breathe 24 hours, 7 days a week, right? So that's a semi-technical and semi-political conversation.
Yeah.
No,
I
but
think,
that's 2-year-olds do that quite well. They question everything. Why? Why can't I do this? Why? And we tend to lose that. We lose that skill to sort of challenge everything from the beginning. Go ahead. Somebody else had a.
Ben, I think it's interesting, with the gig economy and now with Zoom, the only thing that kept me from maybe working with an offshore graphic designer was me. It wasn't them, it was me. My inability to communicate, my inability to tell them what I want. We're all getting better at that. So if you think about ongoing skills development, all of a sudden I tell all the startups, you're competing with every startup attacking the problem globally, not just in Atlanta, like globally. You're competing globally now, so you better have the edge. And I think when it comes to the gig economy in this country, if people don't keep upskilling, like every week, it's not, once a month I'm taking a class. It's like every week you're now competing, because the only barrier was my inability to communicate remotely, my inability to give directions. It wasn't the person, right? I mean, we've all done probably offshore software development. It's rarely them. I mean, sometimes, but it's rarely them. It's us. It's our inability to manage remotely. Now, all of a sudden, I'm getting good at remote.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, well, where can I get the best resource for the best price, that wants to move fast? So you're losing that social element of loyalty, or, feeding on my inability to communicate, that I have to be in a room with you. And I think when it comes to, other than driving, right, which that'll be self-driving cars that replaces those people, but on everything else, it's really like, as we all get better, I'm going to hire analysts in India. I'm going to hire whoever, wherever, because I'll get better at communicating.
Well, thank you. We've certainly gone through predictions and meta predictions, and looking. I hope we've helped people in raising some things to challenge, but also thinking about how to build challenges and predictions as well. I'm sorry we went a few minutes over, Steve. Let me turn it back over to you. Thank you very much, panel.
So Ben, KP, Jane, Nelson, and a hidden Ricky, we really appreciate a very exciting, interesting conversation. I'll find some poets for you next year, Ben, so you can ask your questions and we can get faster answers. They just may not be as good looking. So wanted to thank everybody and wanted to turn it over to Liz Simpson. Liz is our president-elect and will be leading the forum next year. And Liz, why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for your faith in me. I'm totally psyched about working with you all next year. And Ben and panel, what a great panel. I have so many notes. I just don't know if I could even go through them all, but it was really interesting to hear some insights about text messaging being so hot, the YOLO term, of course, always awesome to think about the number of generations in the marketplace as well as in the business world right now. It's awesome. Expediting decision making in this environment, global takes on new meaning, and on. You know, diversity inclusion is still a hot topic, and I'm happy for that. All about diversity and inclusion. Have been fighting for it for years. So this is a really good discussion. Thank you again for being with us tonight. To wrap up, I want to talk about our January event. Our next event is led by our Women Driving Innovation Special Interest Group, January 21st, 6 p.m. Everything from anywhere, where we'll take some of these topics you heard about tonight and we'll do a little bit deeper dive about how remote first is driving change, steering innovations, and empowering employees in unexpected ways. Again, I'd like to say a special thank you to our sponsors, Right Point, Carabiner, Stone Resource Group, Stable Kernel, and of course, Cox Communications. Good night. Happy holidays to everybody. Be safe, be sensible, but really get creative out there and think of not the norm, but the new exciting future. Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Great job. We appreciate it. And Ricky is
Thanks,
waving if we could see him.
Yeah,
Thanks
you
for
can see
coming.
me.
Wave
Bye-bye.
to Ricky.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
See you guys. Have a good holiday.
You
Be
too.
safe.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Good job, Ben.